Okay, I warmly welcome you to my presentation, Cooperative Tourism Development in Destinations with Large Protected Areas. The rest of the title I spare out because I need time. Let's begin with a story. And we will begin at the very beginning with Adam and Eve, so just save some time. No, long story short, if we want to understand the tension between nature conservation and tourism, we have to start here. And we all know the story. In paradise, there was no enmity between all living beings. Everything was in peace, harmony. It was vegan, organic, and without any shaming because everyone was naked. And it is like it is. Human beings are gripped by the thirst of adventure. And yeah, we took the apple and it was time for a sinful change. And we all know the story. We were thrown out of Club Eden. And there is no going back. And we discussed a lot of things today. And we are where we are in the sweat of our brows. And nature conservationists want paradise back. And at least they want to save the last remains of it. And this is a very defensive operation. So nature conservation is a defensive discipline. And tourism managers, on the other side, classical tourism managers like Tyrolean, for example, tourism managers want to create a temporary paradise where the guests can feel like in the proverbial Garden of Eden. After all, everyone has to make a living. They want to make the best out of it. This is something offensive. So nature conservation is something defensive and tourism management, classical tourism management is something offensive. Of course, we all know this in this room, but maybe only in this room. We need both a piece of real paradise and a careful way of valorizing it. Who am I? My name is Osebik. I started my career as a research assistant at the University of Graz. I studied environmental system sciences with specialization on geography. Besides, I studied business administration. So you see in my studies, two hearts are beating in one. And then went to nature conservation and worked at the National Park Gesäuse, which is quite similar to Triglavski National Park. It's only in the northern limestone Alps, but really similar, for example, in flora and fauna. And then happened to be, it was a coincidence, to be the managing director of the Gesäuse Tourism Board, and that's why I'm here. Out of this, we founded the Pilum agency. You can watch it on the internet, or I tell you later. Besides, I'm a lecturer at the University of Graz and at the MCI in Innsbruck. The MCI in Innsbruck is the tourism university, the hardcore tourism university in Tyrol. They're teaching there how to do skiing resorts. So I'm, some exotic there. And we are absolute practitioners in our daily business, but I don't want to make advertisement for our agency. But our main job is to find resilient cooperation models because we heard it today, people have to work together to get the best out of, like Clement told us, the best out of valorizing nature and destinations. So let's start the presentations. What are the common challenges? The cause of most conflicts between tourism and nature conservation is simple. It's a conflict between living space and adventure or leisure space. And this is true for ecological systems as well as urban systems. Think about Venice. It's also a fight between living space and leisure space. And when we talk about over-tourism, this is the fighting term behind this, there is a lot of perceived reality. When we're talking about over-tourism, we mostly talk about overcrowding. And overcrowding can be something absolute when there's a capacity, a technical capacity, for example, on a road or in a cable car, or overcrowding can be something perceived. Because tourism is in the end an ambient service. Only, we saw it at Clement's presentation, the living room model, when we're talking about tourism, we want to feel well. And this is not something absolute, it's something perceived. And when we are doing well and we're feeling well, then tourism works. Think about your last holiday in Greece, for example. The absolute factors aren't that good. It's partly dirty, it's loud and so on, but there is ambience, or in Italy or something like that. So what is the threat behind tourism as an ambient service? On the one hand, nature erosion. We see here Mount Everest. I've worked in Nepal, and it's a great capacity, absolute capacity problem when we're talking about garbage, for example, or sewage systems and so on. And on the other hand, those German people here, cultural erosion. We also heard it at Clemens' lecture. Cultural erosion is the second big problem, and this is a human problem. So there is, and one point left before I start with the solutions. For me, or for our agency, there is hardly 100% sustainable tourism. We've worked in Nepal. If you travel to Nepal, it isn't sustainable when you travel, and when you do, for example, far distance traveling. But we should talk about responsible tourism. This is, I think, the better term, because traveling, except long distance hiking without leaving anything than your footsteps, nothing is sustainable in this world, but it can be responsible. And after COVID, especially regional governance, Clemen surely knows that, is currently the greatest, regional governance is the greatest challenge in nature conservation as well as in tourism. And with these thoughts, we will find out the fields of convergence between both disciplines, tourism and nature conservations. And the first approach could be conceptually the sustainability triangle. Of course, in the sustainability triangle, nature protection is on the environmental side. And tourism is on the economic side of the sustainability triangle. What does nature protection want? Nature conservation organizations want a consistent nature conservation with a high level of social acceptance within the local and super-regional societies. And on the other hand, tourism organizations nearly want the same with other prerequisites. They want economically successful tourism with a high level of trust among the regional stakeholders. That's the job of a tourism manager in the Alps, all over. And whereas the field of convergence, of course, in the social field. We heard it before in other lectures. It's also, it's most important for us to find a social convergence in between those both fields. So the whole challenge we're talking about, healthy tourism or responsible tourism, sustainable tourism, is a social problem first, because both sides are backed up with people. The other conceptual thing how to approach the whole discussion is to see two factors. It's coming out of economics. We can see the world as first nature assets and second nature assets. First nature assets are this, what God has given or nature has given us, in extreme case, untouched wilderness. Second nature is everything man or woman have made out of this. This is an artificial world in extreme. We talked about artificial intelligence and so on. And it depends on how big the overlapping between first nature and second nature is. That high is the potential for nature tourism in the region. For example, here in Triglavski National Park, the potential for nature tourism is quite big, because nearly everything is here first nature, except 5,000 inhabitants in a community with 300 square kilometers of area. And the ultimate goal we have to find, and the next step I'll try to present you the experience of 15 years working in a national park region. I've worked it out with my beloved colleague Herbert Wölger. He's still the director of the National Park Gesäuse. The ultimate goal is to create an ambience that leaves both behind, overnight guests as well as the local inhabitants. Why overnight guests? Because the most problematic target group within tourism, that's connected to over-tourism, are daily guests. That's the truth for most over-tourism problems. So, how can this work? A cooperation model in regions with large protected areas. So the prerequisite is a region with a large protected area. And tourism is very easy. You cannot do tourism without tourism service providers. These are the local enterprises, hopefully the local enterprises, which make tourism happen. You need them because without them you cannot make tourism. There is the first challenging point. Only, and this is perfect in the Alps or not everywhere in the Alps, in the ideal case, the tourism service providers are family and private owned. That's the prerequisite that sustainable or responsible tourism can work. When there are international investors and so on, you have a problem. Then tourism cannot be responsible anymore. The next step is the governance level. And the governance level is in Alpine communities, for example, every time the same. You have a tourism organization, you have the nature protection organization, you have regional politics, which is somewhat problematic or somewhat helping, and visitor management and so on. This governance field is very, really important, but this governance level is discussing a lot and is acting against each other very often. So what do you have to find? You have to find, this is only true, it's only true for the Gesäusen region, we found it, you have to find a guardian principle. You have to define who is responsible for what in a North Korean sense. So no one can talk to the other, you have to do that. Then people start to working proactively. And in our sense, it was that the nature conservation units or organizations are responsible for the values of the tourism in the area. That's important. And regarding the values, there's no discussion. What are the values? The values are clear. We have to protect what we sell, and this is the nature in a nature destination. A practical example, in the early morning in winter for 10 years ago, the National Park director called me as tourism manager and said, stop publishing ski touring videos with people with headlamps on, because we have to protect our I don't have the word chamois or something like that. We don't want to have people in the night out there in the winter. The animals need their calm and so on. And so we stopped publishing such videos. On the other hand, the guardian of the brand and the marketing and the product development, that's most important, is the tourism, because this is the expertise tourism has. Let's start with product development. Product development, when a nature conservation unit is making product development, in extreme cases, no one comes because they're not that attractive, because it's more ideologically imprinted or specialized, for example, as when you're watching small mouses or something like that. There you don't have the public demand behind this. So the product development is strongly connected to tourism, which is near or close to the target group. The other thing is marketing and communication. Tourism organizations are trained for this and are better in communication, mostly better in communication than the nature conservation units. They can help the nature conservation units for better communication. In the case of Gesäuse, we did the public communication as tourism for the national park in most of the cases when there was a need for reach or for a bigger audience, for example. And with such a guardian principle, it can look different, of course, in each region, but to have a guardian principle where the values are based on the local communities as well as the nature conservation units, and the brand and the marketing are located by the tourism organization, this works. And in practical sense, we made here next in the National Park Hohe Tauern a forum, Nature Protection and Tourism, and we worked out with tourism authorities, Austrian tourism authorities, as well as nature conservation authorities. We worked out with scientific background a manifesto a first manifesto. This is only the preliminary result that clears out the challenges we face. And the manifesto, these are only the superficial points behind that. First of all, you need mutual appreciation. When the tourism side says the nature conservationists are idiots and the other way around, it won't work. The second one is really, really important. We're talking different languages. Tourism managers are talking another language or using different terms than nature conservationists. And the third one is competence bundle for more visitor offers. I already told you that's important, that one helps each other to get a better visitor program. The other thing is, and that's important, a coordinated internal and external communication. Our Arch-Chancellor in Austria has said message control to this. No, it's important that you speak the same language, especially in front of the local stakeholders. When the local stakeholders see that you are contradicting, then you have a problem in the governance in your region. And the other thing is, and that's the finish with drinking beer, you need regular exchange formats, especially the informal formats when you're drinking beer together and discussing the real issues you have to solve. In this sense, things are not that complicated. Let's go on. Ad astra. Thank you for your attention.
Cheers.